the dynamic of me and Sophie, we'll argue like crazy at times. Do you know what I mean? We'll argue.
I think that's Sophie, you know.
but that's the great thing. And she's brought in a system of yellow and red cards and, you know, not only for us, but the squaddies as well. And I think the dynamic has just really pushed on. It's gone to another level. I think a lot of people are starting to discover the Highbury squad now and see what we do. And I think a lot of people like it because she's coming really from a fan's point of view. I'm coming from a player's point of view, and it's an interesting dynamic.
Every week, but Kevin, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, as it always is. I feel weird calling you Kevin. I should just be Kev. It's just so...
Kevin, call me deluded, Mr. Deluded, whatever.
Arteta's
call me what you
lawyer.
Like. Arteta's lawyer. Call me what you... Listen, I don't mind. Do you know why? Here's the funny thing, Tom, just before we close. I don't mind being called any of those things. You know why? Because our battles are in-house. But when you get the media who absolutely slay us, and then when Arsenal win, now it's how bad Spurs were, I can't have that.
Hey, as a member of the media now, I can say I'm fighting the fight. I'm doing it from
just like me. Just like me. I'm fighting the fight.
Rest in peace, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. Thank you ever so much for listening and tuning in. And I hope you understand that whilst I'm going to attempt to do my best to do what is a normal show for you all this morning, we cannot start anywhere else except to pay our respects to who was a wonderful man, a brilliant footballer and an Arsenal legend and a friend. And somebody that you became familiar with by watching the channel if you are of a younger persuasion. And for those of an older persuasion, you would have become very familiar with him for his footballing ability in an Arsenal or an Everton or at Nottingham Forest, West Bromwich Albion, going abroad, playing for Trabzonspor as well. Cardiff City, of course, not to forget where he ended his career. Nearly 500 games played, 147 goals scored, and a part of an Arsenal group that were very, very special indeed. And I think of all the kind of pundits and media, former players that ever kind of crossed the divide between the playing days and cross into kind of the media sphere, I don't think anyone's ever been able to, quite like Kevin was, to embrace the fans, the listeners, the readers, the watchers on any platform as much as he did. No one gave as much time to the YouTube community as much as Kevin does. It always feels weird when you say things like the YouTube community. It makes it sound a bit strange, but Kevin was part of the fabric of that. And you can't ever talk about Kevin without talking about Sophie as well. When you talk about the sphere of Highbury squad, because Sophie and Kevin had an amazing relationship on the Highbury squad, and the news of Kevin's passing was such a shock to me. And you know, my immediate thoughts are with his family and friends, but also with Sophie, who has lost a lot in the last year. And I know that the message I put out on social media yesterday, I hope would have inspired some people to send some well wishes her way, and she knows that we're always here for her, and will continue to be so as the world continues to turn. But to just lastly finish this early section of the show with Kevin, I wanted to share with you just some moments of mine. I remember doing the Hippodrome live show with Sophie, where we went up to London in Leicester Square, and I turn up and in the fanciest part of this casino, Kev's there with Sophie, and there he's like, sit down, Tom, order whatever you want. I've got you covered, mate. It's all good. So again, just a showcase of his generosity. First time I met Kevin in person was at the 12 Pins after a game between Arsenal and Watford. You might famously remember Troy Deeney missing a penalty and Petr Cech actually saving a penalty. That's the first time I met Kevin, was at the 12 Pins after that game, where our good friend Magic Mike famously spilled an entire pint down a brand new Arsenal shirt that I'd bought for that season. And the word that I associate the most, I think, with Kevin is consistency, because he never, ever deviates away from the personality that we've all come to to know and love about him, with his generosity, his kindness, his laugh, his humour, his love of Arsenal, his love of talking about Arsenal, his love of meeting new people and making new friends, and to see him leave in what was it's such a quick turnaround. People were obviously asking for updates, and I always wanted to respect the privacy of his family, and we've done that. And I'm still in shock at this. I don't think I've really processed it enough, and all I can say now is just a massive thank you to Kevin for being the brilliant man that he was, and I hope that we will do him justice and do his memory the honour that it deserves here and everywhere. And I know that Sophie as well, and all of those close to Kevin, his friends and his family, have our support and love as we go through what is going to be a very difficult period. Kevin, thank you. You were a brilliant Gooner, an absolute legend, and my friend. Squaddies at ease. Good morning. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. This is the Gooner Talk, the show which joins you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you for tuning in. If you could ever be so kind to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. I would like to just take a moment to say that a massive thank you for all the kind messages that you are putting into the chat box. Thank you for tuning in on, and of course, thank you for being here. This show is not being, I want to make this absolutely clear, not being monetized in any way or form, and that tribute will go out on its own as a standalone as well. So thank you for listening, and please help us on our way, of course, as always, to 1,000 likes as we continue to do so. Thank you for the kind comments throughout the course of the last week. You can tell I am back in usual surroundings now, and back in the UK. I enjoyed my trip over to Italy, had a brilliant time there. Of course, it ended on a rather somber note with the news that dropped yesterday as I was making my way back from Florence, but it was a really good trip, a much needed break, and certainly something which I will hold in my heart for a long time, with the memories that were made there. And I hope you appreciated the effort that went into making the content that went out. We produced some fantastic shows, some really great thoughts. Of course, Sophie have featured heavily in those three. I tell you what's so funny about Sophie, right, is that I said the instructions I sent to all of our guests that contributed, I was like, just send me a couple of minutes worth of clips, which of course Clive went way over, as he would, of just like forwards, midfielders, and then goalkeepers and defenders. And Sophie sent me all these individual clips of the specific positions. I was like, that's the most Sophie brilliant stuff I could ever see. But we are here this morning now in this, I suppose, the second part of this show to talk about Arsenal's latest stories in the last 48 hours, and we're going to deliver them to you. Of course, there may be some things that I miss from the last 48 hours, with it usually being 24, but we'll touch upon those that you're desperate to talk about in part 2 of the show. But good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. I should first of all say thank you so much to many of you for doing so. I'm not necessarily going to read out names. I feel it'd be harsh to miss some comments out, but I'm going to try and put up as many comments as I can while I'm talking through today's story, just with so many of you in the chat box today leaving your kind well wishes as well towards Kevin and those close to him as well. But we start today's show with an update from the European Championships. Of course, we will continue to cover this and continue to bring you all of the stories relating to Arsenal, as much as they are, throughout the duration of the competition. And we start with its opening with Kai Havertz starring alongside Jamal Musiala in a very big victory for Germany over Scotland, probably solidifying their case as one of the potential 3 top favourites, in my view, along with France and England. Spain, of course, as well, looking very, very good, coming out with a 3-0 win over Croatia as well. And of course, we had a result for Italy yesterday, who weren't entirely convincing in their game against Albania 1-2-1. Switzerland winning 3-1 against Hungary. Granit Xhaka with the man of the match performance. Switzerland could be potentially dark horses of this tournament. Today, we've got 3 more games. You've got Poland against the Netherlands at 2 o'clock UK time. Slovenia against Denmark at 5. And then, of course, in the evening, it is Serbia against England, where we expect Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka, of course, to also be taking part in things. But moving into Arsenal transfer news, we start with David Ornstein's report on The Athletic regarding Reiss Nelson. Reiss Nelson, of course, is not a player that we were talking too much about, particularly as a potential outgoing. It was more so the focus was on, well, I suppose Eddie Nketiah, to be honest, was more so the player that we were looking at. But interestingly, a report from David Ornstein in The Athletic to discuss how much Arsenal might get. And with interest from Crystal Palace, from Fulham, from Nottingham Forest, from West Ham United, there is said to be a £20 million asking price on Reiss Nelson, which is quite a significant amount, and certainly an amount of money which, if Arsenal were able to get, I think would be considered quite the coup. I think I estimated between 10 and 15 would be the final price tag, but Arsenal are said to be seeking 20 million, which includes add-ons, of course. So it may be that there's a 10 to 50 million pound fee with a fee rising up to 20 million. But there's significant interest, it seems, in Reiss Nelson. He's got a long-term contract, as we know, homegrown, early to mid-20s as well. So brilliant stuff. And I hope Arsenal can receive a fee in that region. And Arsenal should be looking to try and receive as much money as they can for their players. But Reiss Nelson leaving would certainly put the pressure on Arsenal to try and bring in a wide player. It would reduce the depth that we've got in those positions as well. So I hope that we can do that. Now, Bild in Germany are suggesting that Arsenal are one of the clubs that hold an interest in Serhou Guirassy, the Stuttgart striker. Had a brilliant season, of course, was on the radar of a lot of people throughout the course of that campaign as he banged in goal after goal after goal, was amongst the top scorers in the Bundesliga last season, helping Stuttgart finish second in the division above Bayern Munich, of course. And he has a very low release clause, just upwards of £15 million is said to be the release clause in his contract. Arsenal, according to Bild, are one of the clubs that have considered Guirassy, supposedly. I'm not sure how real this story is. At 28 years of age, he turns 29 in March of next year. I'm not sure the profile necessarily fits. But what I would say is, of course, without there being too many kind of high profile or obvious striker candidates, could it be that if this news is true, which I haven't been able to validify myself, that Arsenal look for a short-term striker option to bring depth in and to give a better option perhaps than Eddie Nketiah? He has had one brilliant season, and there's always something of a risk, I think, when you look at players that have had one brilliant season as opposed to a player that've got kind of a star-studded track record of consistent campaigns. But what I do think is that Guirassy is not necessarily going to be one that inspires the Arsenal fan base in terms of signings. But who knows? Could be a short-term option. I'd be surprised, though, if this was one that got done. And Amadou Onana as well. We've seen some really interesting links to Amadou Onana over the last 48 hours. We heard previously that there was really no chance that Onana was going to be on the radar of Arsenal. But then reports from the Liverpool Echo suggested that Arsenal would be looking at him. I believe it was James McNicholas as well reported at The Athletic that Arsenal were not currently pursuing a deal for Onana. But then in the last couple of days, there's been suggestions that Arsenal have made inquiries about Onana. That said, there were also inquiries suggesting that a Champions League club had made an approach, but then further to that, there were suggestions it was Aston Villa that were the team that had approached Everton about a potential deal for Amadou Onana. They could see him as a replacement, of course, for Douglas Luiz, who could be leaving for Juventus, and he does look like he will be leaving for Juventus. I think there was a story going around yesterday that Alicia Lehmann, of course, who's with Douglas Luiz in a relationship, is also potentially moving to Juventus. So I think the cogs are seemingly turning for that deal or double deal to happen. Certainly a unique one if that happens. I can't remember the last time that two players that were in a relationship moved to the same club from the same club that they're currently at. Quite the story. I quite like it. But Amadou Onana in this instance, it seems, could have an interest from Arsenal, but certainly there's some conflicting reports surrounding the player at the moment. And the headline story today is, according to L'Equipe, Arsenal have made contact with PSG over the potential signing of Xavi Simons, a player that you know that I very much like and appreciate. And I really do push ahead with this one. I would really love to see Arsenal make a move for Xavi Simons. The caveat to this is that PSG have absolutely no interest in selling Simons. The only interest they've got is in letting him go on loan. Now, I wouldn't necessarily be wildly against the idea of signing Xavi Simons on loan. That said, I would want some guarantees about potentially a future signing be that in the form of an option or an obligation to buy Simons at the end of that deal. But PSG, I don't know how keen they would be on it and inserting that. If it is just a loan, it's a difficult one to get on board with as much, because I never like the idea of developing another club's players. I never like that. I've never felt like I've wanted to see Arsenal do that. And so for that reason, I would struggle, I think, to get on board with the idea of just a straight loan. But if you say it was like him or nobody, and getting in some, depth in that wide option and attacking midfield option as well, he's a great, pacey, dynamic dribbler of the ball, drives at opposition players. He's that winger type that I want to see at Arsenal, and certainly would be of the ilk that I'd like to see Arsenal go for, because he takes players on, and we need someone of that character trait at Arsenal. And yeah, I'd love to see it happen, but difficult to know whether or not Arsenal would go for a straight loan with no strings attached in regards to an option or anything like that. Now, of course, the channel is sponsored by Football Prizes, and you can win a brand new prize, which is a signed and framed Declan Rice shirt. There are plenty of tickets still available. There's 100 that have been sold, which means we've got just under 250 left. Link down in the description to get your hands on this one. There's a Saliba signed Arsenal shirt, a Martinelli signed Arsenal shirt, and a Ramsdale signed Arsenal shirt as instant win prizes, as well as plenty of Football Prizes site credit too. So best of luck to those that get involved with the latest competition, and the link for that is down in today's video description. Well, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, I thought what we would do at the start is perhaps read out some of those Kev Campbell comments before we go into today's questions. This comment from Rob in the chat says, Kev was a gentleman, foremost, and a football fan. Will be remembered for his honest opinion on Arsenal and all other clubs, without nastiness in any comment. Rest in peace. Kevin, Let's go to Robert. Says, Tom, we all mourn, but in time, you and the gang who knew him well will always celebrate the lovely times together. You're absolutely right. Drew says, never had the privilege to watch Kevin play, but I have listened to him a lot on yours and Sophie's channels. Rest in peace, Super Kev. It was honoured to listen to your insightful opinions. Chris says, a very sad day. Love to all his family and friends. Robert says, Harry's tribute, Harry Simi, of course, on the Chronicles of Gooner. Make sure you're watching his stuff. The tribute yesterday was very touching. He was fighting to keep the tears back. I'm not surprised. Myself and Harry shared a room with Kevin many times and shared some great moments together as well. G-Dog says, saddest news I've heard in a long time. Love to Kevin Campbell. Jason, OMG, rest in peace, Kevin. God bless you and your family. Dominic says, rest in peace, Kevin. And I hope that you're coping well with the loss of a friend, Tom. Thank you for the concern, Dominic. I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. Damien says, it's days like yesterday that remind you that there are more important things in life than football. Rest in peace, Super Kev. Oda Relay says, good morning. Sorry to hear about Super KC. Sending you my thoughts and prayers and the family too. MD says, RIP Super Kev. I was really shocked, even though I knew he was taken ill, but I just felt that he would pull through. We all did, mate. We all did. Zimmern UK says, morning, Zor. Wishing you a happy Father's Day as well, in the most KC possible way, of course. And it being Father's Day here in the UK today, it stands true to be thinking about the family of Kevin and his children and those closest to him as well. Damien says, morning, all horrible day yesterday. Rest in peace, Kevin. Absolutely. Black Shine says, Kevin Campbell, had the pleasure of seeing him play at Highbury during his Arsenal career. A pleasure that, the young guns and people like myself sadly didn't. We were so young at the time. He left Arsenal the year after I was born. In fact, the kit I'm wearing right now, which was very kindly donated by one of our older listeners, Morgie, actually was the final kit from the 94-95 season, the final season that Kevin Campbell played for Arsenal as well. But thank you for the kind message. Sorry that I can't read them all out, but I have glanced at them and picked as many of them out as I can as well. So thank you for all the very kind words. We'll move now into our questions for this. Jean, who adds on the end of his question, which I'll start with, says, I loved Super Kevin, sending you, Sophie, Harry, and all the others plenty of love. And Jean's question is, which Arsenal player do you think will be talked in most positive terms after the Euros? It's a really good question, actually, because we hope it's players like Saka and Reiss, but maybe it could be somebody like Jakub Kiwior. That could be something really interesting if he has a really good tournament for Poland. There's always this edge when you talk about the European Championships, because it becomes, in recent times, of course, with the last edition of the tournament, so synonymous with the abuse suffered by Bukayo Saka and Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho in particular. And so I really hope that it's Bukayo Saka, especially after the awful kind of trend we saw going into the tournament off the back of that defeat to Iceland in England's last friendly before the tournament kicked off. So I really hope it is that as well. So yeah, let's hope that it's players like Saka that are indeed talked about. And I want to point out this from Martin as well. He says honourable mention also to the young Millwall goalkeeper Matija Sarkic, who sadly passed away as well yesterday, aged just 26. Incredibly sad story. And I was saying to my other half yesterday, it's the timing of both of these sad passings. It's in some ways frustrating because that is a massive story. A current player at 26 years of age passing away, it would be a huge story. It would take all of the attention, and it shouldn't be diminished in any way whatsoever. But of course, the monumental weight of Kevin's passing in some ways overshadowed that story. And I think it's important, Martin, that you bring it up. So thank you for doing that. I said we'd be moving on to questions, but continually more and more very nice tributes continue to come in. Green Panther says, morning, Tom. So sorry to hear about Kevin's passing away. Rest in peace. And my thoughts are with his family. Barry says, so sorry. Loved Kev. Rich says, rest in peace, Kevin. Great player and wonderful commentator as well. Question from Peter says, Tom, has Gabriel Jesus had a knee procedure in terms of the what happened with him previously? I don't know if he's had anything this summer. It's certainly not been made aware to me that he had anything this summer. He did have a secondary procedure after, of course, suffering that serious knee injury, which was said to repair and kind of finish some of the issues that had not been solved by the initial surgery. So we're looking forward, hopefully, to a really big season from Gabriel Jesus as well. So hopefully Gabby Jesus can have a really, really positive campaign for Arsenal as well. Kish says, Tom, the content you put out with the other content creators' opinions and transfers was great. Thank you, mate. That's very kind of you indeed. Rob says, if/when we sell Eddie Nketiah, is Guirassy at 50 million a good temporary option if we're waiting for a Sesko in a year's time, or are we better holding on to Eddie for a season until Sesko becomes available in 2025? It's an interesting point that, of course, the issue I've got with signing Guirassy on a short term is because the striker areas are not they're not very spacious. Like, you could definitely sign a midfielder like a Kimmich of that level in the short term. He'd bring you top quality for a number of years, and you could still then go out and sign a top centre midfielder later on down the line. The problem with the centre forward position is that it's quite convoluted and a much smaller position to fill. So if you sign a player like Guirassy, you are committing to that player for a period, and I'm not sure that there is then space to bring in another player like a Sesko. So it's very, very difficult to just get a stopgap striker at this kind of level. You can definitely bring in players at the level of Kimmich's quality for midfield, but I'd be a bit conscious of going for a striker like Guirassy to be a stopgap for a year or two, because I feel like it does fill up a space in the squad that could be better perhaps filled or be more patient with. Heavyweight says, Tom, devastating news. Never knew Kevin personally, but from watching your channel and Harry's, he seems so excited about Arsenal. Condolences to him and his family. Absolutely. Sean says, do you think the lack of any clear transfer targets from the media's perspective is part of the club's strategy for doing deals this summer? Sean, to be very honest with you, it's always the club's strategy to be as secretive as possible. I wrote a story last summer about the Fabio Vieira deal and how it was a big indication of the evidence behind Arsenal's secrecy in transfers. Sometimes things get out, sometimes things are discussed, but the club put a lot of effort into keeping things as quiet as they can. Continually, your tributes are coming in. Adrian says, RIP Super Kev, you're a big part of my childhood and will never be forgotten. Football Fans Club says, I was at work yesterday when I heard the news of Kev's passing, and the young keeper as well. It grabbed me. I couldn't work again. I had to come home in tears. I miss Super Kev voice on the Highbury squad. Rest in peace, Kev. Absolutely. And if it's a really good point. If you have been affected by this and any other passing, of course, in recent times and present times, it's important to look after yourselves. And we always talk about the importance of mental health. I know that me and Kevin shared a few conversations about, online abuse and coping with that. And we definitely had different ways of coping with both of our dealings with online abuse. I'm very much a trigger happy ban hammer when it comes to that on my social media platforms. And Kev is the complete opposite. Doesn't block anyone, doesn't mute anyone, doesn't ban anyone. He was very different in that regard. But what we both agreed on was the importance of looking after yourself. And so if you do need to take a moment, take a break from anything, for any reason, make sure that you do look after yourselves. Ramsey says Partey could be on his way to Saudi Arabia. Is it a good deal if we can get 20 to 25 million? If Arsenal get upwards of 20 million for Thomas Partey, I think they would have done very, very well indeed. Derek says, morning, Tom. Did you see Ronaldinho's statement on the Brazilian national team? I did see it and was very disappointed, actually. I'm not wildly in tune with the Brazilian national side, right? I'll read you the comment for those that haven't seen it. He wrote on Instagram, "That's it, folks. I've had enough. This is a sad moment for those who love Brazilian soccer. It's getting hard to find the spirit to watch the games. This is perhaps one of the worst teams in recent years. It has no respectable leaders, only average players for the majority. I've been following football since I was a kid, long before I thought about becoming a player, and I've never seen a situation as bad as this. Lack of love for the shirt, lack of grit, and the most important of all, football. I repeat, our performance has been one of the worst things I've ever seen. Such a shame. I therefore declare my resignation. I will not watch any CONMEBOL Copa America games, nor celebrate any victory." Now, if we just have a quick look at Brazil's record, of course, this is a Brazilian side that includes 2 Arsenal players right now. So when he says words like, average, in the majority, there's a chance he could be talking about the likes of Gabriel Magalhaes and Gabriel Martinelli as well. This is a Brazilian side who just drew with the United States 1-1 in a friendly game. It was just a friendly ahead of the Copa America tournament. They beat Mexico 3-2 again on Sunday the 9th of June. So a win there, and they beat England, of course. They drew 3-3 with a very good Spain side in another friendly as well recently in Europe. Brazil have got a fantastic squad still. They've got some brilliant players. They've, the likes of Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, our own Martinelli, Gabriel. You look at Marquinhos. I mean, you talk about leaders. Marquinhos, Alisson, I look at as very much leaders in that group. You've got other young players in the centre-half positions. Our own Gabriel, of course, Eder Militao, another one. You've got Douglas Luiz. You've got Endrick, a player like Endrick coming through, the talent that's there. I still think it's a very good Brazilian side. I think it's a bit of a cop-out from Ronaldinho. Personally, I don't agree with his comments at all. And to talk so disparagingly about, your own nation's players, and with a very young team of that as well. The Brazilian side's got a lot of very young players holding the weight of a nation on it. I think it's really poor. It's very poor form indeed from Ronaldinho. I think it was, very poor from him. Moving swiftly forwards, Sam Lowe says, "Hey Tom, sorry for the loss of your close friend and amazing player Kevin Campbell. My first memory of him was when I was 5, and me and my granddad were season ticket holders at Highbury. Such a guy. He will be missed." Thank you for your kind comment as well. Maximus says, "Hi Tom, no question, but I will forever miss Super Kev's at ease squaddies in his baritone voice. My condolences to his near and dear ones, and Sophie from the Highbury squad as well." Granddaddy Gooner Paul says, "The passing of Super Kev is like losing a friend, even though I didn't know him personally." And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think that, he had that aura about him. He just exudes friendship, camaraderie, togetherness. That it's, footballers sadly do pass away, and we hear of their passings a lot, and you see the tributes pour out. There was something different about yesterday, I thought, when I was reading the comments. I was sitting at in a cafe in Florence waiting for my flight, and I was scrolling through the social media and scrolling through kind of the Sky report of it and some of the articles that have been written. It's very, even though it's so common, sadly, to lose our heroes and lose players in the sport, there was just something different, I thought, about the coverage, which highlighted just how loved he is. And I say he is. I kind of, I don't want to use the word was, because that love for Kevin's never going to extinguish, and his memory will be carried on, through Sophie and through other content creators that knew him so well. And I also want to give Lee Judges as well a mention, because Lee was very, very close with Kev. Lee introduced me to Kevin, actually, and I know Lee will be in a lot of pain as well. So I know we've talked and rightfully about Sophie's connections to the hybrid squad, but shouldn't forget that Lee was very, very close with Kevin, and spent a lot of evenings, a lot of drinks together. And as Kev told me on a show I did, in fact, you can go back and watch. Me and Kevin did a dedicated show. In fact, I'll probably leave a link to it in the clips at the start of today's show are from that dedicated episode where we did a bit of a chat show series, and Kevin was one of our guests, and we talked about online abuse, we talked about social media, we talked about the hybrid squad, we talked about how he got involved with it, we talked about his playing career, we talked about lots of really important topics. So I'll leave a link to that show down in the description if you would like to watch it and watch it back. It's from a couple of years ago, but it still rings true, a lot of what he said. It was during a different time for Arsenal. We were talking a lot about Arsenal at that point as well. So yeah, I recommend you watch that. But we talk a lot about Lee, and he talks very fondly of Lee as well. He does Sophie and others as well in that show. So I recommend going and watch that if you would like to re-immerse yourself into the brilliance of that man. Let's go to a couple more before we wrap up today's show. Tiger says, "Is Sophie taking a rest or is carrying on?" I don't know. I've not pried into what Sophie's plans are. And I think it's important to respect people's privacy at these difficult moments and not press people for questions and answers about what their plans are. And I'm sure Sophie will take the time that she needs to make the right decisions on what she wants to do, and whatever she wishes to do. We certainly will respect whatever Sophie is, and she's got all of our love and support, and she knows that. So yeah, I actually was able to. Sophie asked me to send in a little video note to Kevin when he was battling his illness, and she sent me a message yesterday letting me know that he very much appreciated the message that I and others sent through, and that was really nice to know that he saw that. In some of his last days. MD says, "I actually cried. I rarely do. He gave the aura of a friend that was aware abroad," or something like that. Yeah, clearly a nice guy. Sam says, "I think the coverage reflects just how real the man was, and the Kev you see, who everyone would see, was real. And that is rare, absolutely." And Neil says, "All the tributes across the national media just sums up what a superb player and, more importantly, what an elite human being Super Kev was box office. Absolute top man." That's a really nice closing quote, I think, Neil. Thank you. And thank you to all of your messages. This has been a very strange show. I wanted to obviously deliver our dedicated coverage, but never as a primary, always as the secondary to the main focus of today, which was to reflect and pay tribute to Kevin Campbell. And I hope that you think we've done that, and I hope that you think we've done that in the right way. So thank you for those that have tuned in and listened. As I say, I'll leave a link down to that show that I did with Kevin a couple of years ago. That was always an absolute honor, but a great fun. And also me, Kevin, Clive, and Arsblog did a couple of shows together as kind of a dedicated end of transfer window episodes. If you just type in the Gooner Talk Kevin Campbell, you'll be able to get the episodes that Kevin has appeared on the show, and watch those back and to get some moments again from those shows. So feel free. And if you don't want to do that again, and you want to take yourself away and have something of a break and just reflect privately and quietly, that is also absolutely fine. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support and your kind words and your tributes throughout today's episode. It's been, as I say, very strange, but I think, special in its own way. And I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, of course, to give you all of the latest Arsenal news from the next 24 hours. Round up today's games, of course, with England in action. Of course, our very own Kevin Campbell earned, caps for the England youth side, and the England B team as well was very much a part of the England setup as well. So hopefully the boys can bring it home for him a little bit later on today. Drop a like, subscribe, all that usual YouTubey stuff, and I'll end today with the ever present and immortalized words of Ati Squaddies.